So when Brandon asked me to talk about a lesson I had learned, I tried to think of one example where I had made a mistake, learned from it, and moved on. And it occurred to me that most of the time it's just not that easy. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I have to learn lessons more than once, right? Let's see. Okay. And so sometimes they have to hit me over the head multiple times. And for me, one of those lessons is about conflict. Now, I don't know if it's just part of my, my genetic makeup, or if it's just all those years practicing ignoring the elephant in the living room. But conflict just makes me uncomfortable at a gut level. I get this sinking feeling, oh, there's conflict, that's not good, okay? And so whenever there's well, let me just define conflict for you, right? I don't mean reasoned critique. I don't mean calm, unemotional discussion. I mean the messy stuff when our emotions get involved because, you know, somebody's ego's involved or there's something that they're passionate about. That's the kind of stuff that makes me squeamish. And so when there's conflict afoot, my first instinct is to head the other way, okay? Now, think about it. How often do you not have conflict in your job, right? When you're doing design, emotions get involved, right? Sometimes we have to give our staff members uncomfortable feedback, or maybe we have another department manager who feels like his team's been stepped on, or we're just deeply invested in a vision that we think is pretty grand, and we're not so happy when people critique it. So, you know, how do we manage that stuff? Well, the fact is that conflict avoided is a train wreck in the making, right? And I think that this is because it's in conflict that we reveal our goals as human beings and as colleagues, right? The stuff we get emotional about, we only get emotional about because some need of ours isn't getting met. Is that a need for respect or appreciation or just a need for involvement? Doesn't matter. That's where we get upset, and that's where conflict happens. So, you know, some days you really want that easy win, right? In design management, we don't get a whole lot of those. But every time I have a meeting that just seems like it was a little too easy, there's a nagging voice in the back of my head that says, oh yeah, you took that easy win today, but you're gonna be sorry for that. Because it blows up in some fashion. Because what happens is, I'm not the only one averse to conflict. Some of you guys might think it's fun, some of you probably don't. But there are a lot of people around us who are also at least as conflict averse as I am. And so one of the signs that somebody is avoiding conflict is that you're pedaling pretty fast and not making a whole lot of progress. One example of this, about a year and a half ago, I had a team working on a pretty straightforward design language project with, let's call them the nicest client in the world, okay? Think, what's his name, Flanders on The Simpsons, okay? Really sweet people, gotta love them. And so we did the usual, right? Come up with a range of options and show them to the client and talking about pros and cons, and they pick one, we move on. And so we're digging into detailed design, and we found over the next few weeks that the clients just kept making these weird little objections to tiny little details. They were very mild objections, but there were a lot of them, and they were about weird things. Well, as it turned out, they were uncomfortable with the direction entirely. But their culture was so conflict averse, they made me look, you know, ready for a fight. And so they were really concerned. How often does this happen to you? They were concerned about the designer's feelings. They didn't want to hurt our feelings, okay? But the end result is we wasted a couple of weeks. And so how do we solve this, right? When there's this thing that's good for us but just kind of icky, how do we deal with it? Well, in handling that situation and others like it, I found a few strategies that help me get past my distaste, and I think they help other people as well, and maybe they'll work for you as well. One of them I learned many years ago. If you remember back in college in the res halls, you had RAs. Well, one of the things you do as an RA is you mediate roommate conflicts. Things like, she plays her music too loud, and so forth. Well, one of the tools that I learned then I still use to this day, and that's taking the emotion a notch down in the discussion by focusing on the objective behavior and its consequences. And so there's this magic little sentence structure that works really well. When you, I feel, because. Right? When you objected in that meeting, I felt ambushed because you didn't raise that concern when we talked privately earlier, right? What it does is it acknowledges my feeling, but it does it in a way that's easier to receive than, wow, you were really a jerk in that meeting, right? It doesn't feel like an attack. So that's a useful tool. Now, sometimes people bring uncomfortable feedback to me, things that I don't really want to hear. And so what I find helps me in that situation is to, again, take the emotion down a notch by acknowledging, I can tell that you're angry, right? Or I'm sorry to hear that you felt surprised by that, right? They feel acknowledged. And what's nice is by reflecting back that feeling, I find that I can not take it in and not respond emotionally myself. And that takes the conflict down a notch as well. But, you know, these are reactive strategies. And of course, there's the case where, you guys know this, right? You get too busy, you get overwhelmed, and you don't respond to things in the best way possible. And so what I find is if I just can't deal with it at the moment, right, I'd really like to hear what you have to say and give it my full attention. Can we have this discussion later today, right? Don't put it off forever. But people are usually okay with that. But I find that the best tactic for dealing with conflict is to invite it explicitly, right? If I say, bring it on, I'm open to it, I know it's coming, I feel in control of that. And it also says to other conflict-averse people that it's okay. Now, a simple invitation isn't enough, right? You guys know you have to repeat yourself multiple times. You have to say to people that conflict is okay. You may also have to create some explicit structures in your discussions for conflict to happen. I don't know if you're familiar with Edward de Bono, but he's got a book called 6 Thinking Hats. Kind of interesting. It's a quick read. A lot of it will feel obvious, but there's some good tools. And when people are wearing the black hat in a meeting, they are given permission, in fact expected, to be critical, right? They're supposed to critique. They're supposed to come up with only negative things, only things they're worried about. And so this opens the door for the people who are afraid to hurt people's feelings to say this stuff. Now, the nice flip side of this is when you have the perpetual naysayers in your team, and I'm sure you have a few of those, well, sometimes they have to put on the yellow hat, which is the Little Miss Sunshine hat, right, where we have to find some good things about what's going on. The other thing that I try to do, and I don't always do it so well, is when somebody offers something difficult to hear, I try to take it as a gift. Perhaps it was offered in a generous spirit, perhaps it wasn't. But if I stop and think, okay, this person has just given me something valuable, right, then I can respond in kind, and I can really sincerely thank them. Wow, thanks for sharing that with me. I know that was probably difficult to say. And when you're a manager and you're kind of above the ladder in for people, it gets even harder for them to deliver that feedback to you. So it's especially important how you respond to it, right? If you say I'm not defensive, right, that's not going to work so well. And what I find is that when I respond in that spirit, people are more willing to bring possible conflict to my attention, and they get more constructive about it and less worked up about it the next time because they feel like it's going to be heard. So there isn't that emotional urgency behind it. So that works pretty well also. Now, like a lot of good habits, I find that this behavior is habit forming. So maybe I don't feel like that comment is a gift in the moment in that meeting, but if I force myself to respond this way anyhow, well, I find the more that I do this, the more I'm able to see conflict as valuable. The thing is that we have to work through conflict and have everybody feel like their needs are getting met, or we don't get to genuine commitment, right? And when we're doing big initiatives, whether that's a big redesign or overhauling an organization, we've got to get genuine commitment and not just superficial buy-in, where people nod their heads because the CEO's sitting there and expects them to, but where they really believe it. And so we've got to work through this difficult stuff. So it gets easier as time goes on. So, you know, I am never going to be, bring on the conflict, yippee, I get to have an argument today. I'm just never going to be happy with that, right? But I do find that using some of these techniques, at least on my good days, gets me to feel like conflict is not a detour sign, but is more of a speed bump, right? Something that I need to slow down for and pay attention to. And I think the end result is, you know, safer streets for everybody in the design world, right? Okay. Thanks for your attention.